And basically the purpose of this meeting is to kind of figure out why we ended up with an overage in the schools, and kind of what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen again, or at least doesn't happen in the same way again.
More information.
Okay.
You probably already have the first two pages.
Yeah.
Is this the same thing?
There's some additional, yeah, the last two pages are additional.
So Jim, I'm also, besides, what happened during the year historically, I'm kind of curious about, what things are we going to be doing on a go-forward basis, especially as this, and we pointed out clearly it was one schedule, that problem not.
Right.
And how do we, the finance committee, sort of become alert to it and see what more we can do, especially now that we have a new sped reserve in play.
Right, and it certainly highlights why we were requesting that be in place for years such as this. I'll start by saying I apologize that I wasn't more forceful in demonstrating what was going on this year to the Finance Committee. I know that we've been, during the school committee meetings, during the year, I give at least a monthly budget stats report, and this is exactly what they've been getting each month. Review it with the town manager, and then actually, if you look at the front page, the town accountant, Lynn Savage, and the town manager were providing me with their situation at the same time I was providing them with our situation. And the fact that it was being done in public up on the screen during the school committee meetings, I unfortunately made the assumption that you guys were aware of it as well. And I know that during our presentation, which happened to be in this room, I mentioned that this year was a perfect example of why we need the stabilization fund when we're talking about the stabilization fund. So saying that, I will say that, as I said, this is what we've been reviewing all year, and I think the easiest solution to what you were talking about, Tim, is forwarding the budget status report onto the Finance Committee right after each school committee meeting that is presented at, and then there's no question, you don't have to watch the meetings, you'll get the status report and you'll know exactly what our situation is.
Okay.
So, I'll just go through it and answer any questions you might have, but basically what happened is we had a hit, so to speak, of over $1 million, mainly tuitions for out-of-district students. We keep track of, and that's what the last two pages I've added are, shows how we track our out-of-district costs. So you can see we had kindergarten grant reduced by $30,000. The out-of-district tuition was almost $800,000 more than anticipated, which also equates to an increase in out-of-district transportation costs and specialist services. Now, those are actually a way for us to save money or avoid additional costs, because those are services we provided in district in order to prevent more students from going out of district. And then we had an impact of snow overtime as well as the town, but not nearly as much. It did have a little bit of impact on us. So we have hit every year that we have to account for and make adjustments during the year. And we've done that in the past few years, but to try to sustain $1 million hit, it just wasn't feasible. What we were able to do, we had $175,000 from the town manager that we had kind of banked. He had given that to us the previous year, and we hadn't needed it, so we kept it as a contingency coming into this year. We finished last year with $21,000, which is nothing when you've got a $40 million budget, but we had that left and we used it to prepay. We had also included in our budget $150,000 in contingency for out-of-district expenses. Every year there's turnover savings, which is mostly for us, it's teachers who retire or resign at the upper level and are replaced by teachers at the top of the salary scale or the bottom, whichever way you look at it, but lower paid. And that difference, so, when we start off the year, we have usually between $100,000 and $130,000 less than we had budgeted in payroll. So we had to use that. Normally it's for things that come up during the year. School budget reductions, we froze our accounts and stopped spending, and were able to generate $73,000 there. Utility savings, that's kind of the beginning of the impact of Amoresco project. We anticipate that to be $288,000 a year going forward. That's the commitment in the contract. But for this year, because it didn't start right away, we saw our $110,000 savings there. And then a couple of items that we have outside of the general fund, transportation revolving account, we can have that contribute a little more to the expenses, or covering expenses, as well as food services. Noon attendance, those people who monitor the lunches and recess. Now the part that is outdoors cannot be covered by food services. It's pretty much an enterprise fund, but those services provided by the new attendants to monitor lunch inside can be, so we shifted those expenses over to food services. It only resulted in a pickup of $725,000, leaving the $391,450 that you saw. And if you look at page 2, I highlighted how out of character this year really was. If you look at the history, it goes up and down. The most we had ever seen in an increase in out-of-district tuitions had been 10.47%. This year was 25%. And fortunate or unfortunate, there's a mechanism within the state funding for circuit breaker. If you're familiar with circuit breaker. Circuit breaker is how the state reimburses us for extraordinary expenses for any one student. So they take the state average, multiply it by 4 for the cost of a student. It's about $42,000. So anything over $42,000, they will reimburse you the following year. And we have many students, as you'll see on the last 2 pages, who qualify for that. So we saw a 25%, I was going to say, there's a mechanism for if you see a year where you actually have more than 25% than you did the year before, anything over that 25%, they'll reimburse you that same year. Now, we got right to 25%. If we had more, then we would have gotten some relief, but it's really not a benefit because you only get a certain percentage of that, so you're still adding to the total when you reach that point. So the other thing I wanted to show, besides how bad this year was and why we were in the situation we were, was that it is kind of a roller coaster, and next year we're starting out in a good position. As you can see, we have in our budget almost $5.85 million between what we'll get in circuit breaker funds and what we have in the budget for out-of-district tuition and services, versus what we are showing right now, and that's what I have in the last 2 pages. This is how we track our out-of-district costs. I took out the school name because if a student is the only one at a school, you could identify them, and I took out the student name, obviously, any way to identify a student. But we have that information, and we also have the tuition for the year that we are charged. Any summer, if the student is not just a school year, but also during the summer, or if they get any other services besides classroom services, that's all included. And there are 3 different categories in out of district, and I labeled it for you. 9100, if you ever see that in our coding, are for if we sent a student to another public school, if we send them to a collaborative that we are not a member of, or if we send them to a regional school district that we're not a member of any regional, then that would fall into 9100, and you can see the total for tuitions is almost $1 million, and then summer is another $69,000, and services is $33,000. second category are non-public schools. So those are the private out-of-district placements. And those are generally the most expensive. As you can see, we have some, you know, especially when they're residential all year round and require a lot of services, we have 210,000, 194,000, 243,000. Those are individual students. And that's what really hits us hard is when we get one of those students come into the district that, you know, we didn't know about, and all of a sudden it's a placement. And just so you understand, on a private placement, the school district that they're coming from owns them till the end of the school year. And then the next school year, you own them, for whatever that cost is. And then the last, and that, as I said, is our highest. That's over $3.5 million in tuition, and another $129,000 in summer school, and $41,000 in services. And then we are a member of collaboratives, especially CREST. And those tend to cost us less, the benefit of being there. And you can see that those students that we can send there cost us $617,000 and another $37,000 and $27,000. So the total right now for the students that we have in district is $5.5 million versus the budget of $5.85. So right now we have $350,000 to deal with any move-ins that might occur. Now, the move-ins that we have to account, there's two categories really we have to account for during the school year. One being a student who currently is in school, but then they have an IEP meeting and decide that student would be better serviced out of district. That can happen. And the second one is if a student moves in who's in a collaborative, we own them right away for whatever the cost is for the rest of the year. So $350,000 is a pretty good number to start the year. It's a lot better than we've had in the past.
Now, where's that $350,000 number?
Yeah, right now our budget is, if you look at the first page, sorry, the second page, yeah, our budgeted amount right now is $5,844,000, and this totals $5,499,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you reconciled the difference between what your budget, your projected, and what the actual was for FY15? Because from my view of things, I would say you're actually short if I looked at FY15 as a go-forward kind of number for 16.
Right.
So why would I say that it's going to go down to 5.5 when in fact it looks like it's going to stay 5.5?
Right, we do that every year. We reconcile what we actually have versus what is in the budget, or what the actual expenses were. So you're right, if you were looking at what we ended up spending this year, that's not, there's no correlation between what you spent this year and next year, because we are graduating a lot more students this year. That's where this is coming from. I should have mentioned that. We're graduating and students are aging out. We own them until 23. And so we're aging out a lot more students this year than we did last year. And that's where our
So you know specifically who's aging out, and
Yep.
the wild card is you don't know who's going to come
Who's
in.
going to come in?
That's the wild card,
Alright.
exactly, and that's why we said, you know, we had requested from Andrew a mechanism for dealing with, you know, more than you could normally account for. We feel our responsibility is to do what we can to accommodate that. So we're starting with $350,000. We continue to have meetings, just had another one today, about ways that we can reduce staffing, which is really the most productive way to reduce your budget. Before we even start next year, to add to that $350,000. And then, you know, we would tap into that before we would request anything from the stabilization fund.
Can you tell me what you budgeted for FY15 for the out-of-district tuition?
You can see our budget for FY15 was $5,090,000.
No, I was just looking for it. I'm looking at costs by accounts. So I'm looking at the account for out-of-district schools, and I see that it's 3 million.
Right, in the budget, yeah, and that's one of the,
566, which is a different number
Yeah.
than
What
what
you're
you
looking
have
at-
here.
right, what you're looking at for the operating budget on that sheet are all the line items that pertain to out-of-district tuition, not all the 9100s, the 9300s, the 9400s.
Oh,
And,
well, wait. You have a line here that says operating budget?
right,
Okay, I need to know whether that language includes just the sped tuition out of district account, which ends in, what is that?
it includes out-of-district tuition, specialist services, and summer school.
Okay,
So all those line
can you
items.
tell me which accounts those are? I
Not
need
off
to
the top
find
of
them.
my head, no. I can't.
How can I find them in here?
What are you looking at?
I am looking at recommended school budget detail by program.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm looking at. And I'm wondering why, and you're telling me that your 3,667,143 contains a number that's in addition to that particular account. Is that right?
Right. This is adding up all of our line items. I'd have to look through the budget, and I can send you that, to show all the line items that make up $3,667,143. In addition, there's the circuit breaker money is what we actually receive.
Okay, so it was basically about $100,000 difference. I can see between the two numbers, that's
Right.
that number and this
Yeah, that's the
number.
bulk of it, but,
Okay,
Right.
so when we label something, it would help me to put an asterisk on it and tell me what it's made up of. What I really did want to see was this account for out-of-district tuition, the one that ends in, what is it, 9100?
yep.
I would like to see what can I say? This is an account, so there's got to be some kind of a statement and some sort of a timeline with dates on it. The drawdown of that account over the course of the year.
Yeah,
Why?
I'm not
Because
sure.
I'd like to know when it was that we first figured out that we were getting in trouble.
As soon as somebody moves in.
Yeah.
As soon as the date they move in,
Yeah.
and we have to account for it.
Yeah, okay, I like the dates, I like it,
Maybe another way to maybe kind of pull out the others. So we know people move in throughout the year. So maybe the question is, there may or may not be a pattern, but I think what would be helpful is to know when these people moved in. In other words, when the surprise is. Maybe that's a way of kind of giving.
I don't think this is as complicated as you might be making it, in that right now, our budget for next year for out-of-district services is $5,844,000. And right now, the students that we have are $5,499,000, right? So when I do a budget status report, and then they're done starting in September, it will show you 5.844 for the budget. And if we get an additional student or lose a student, which would be nice, then that number will be there, and you'll be able to track the variance between those for the whole year.
That's in
I
this
see.
monthly report you do.
That's in the
Yeah.
monthly report that you do. And in this budget for the out-of-district tuition, where does that number come from? How is it developed?
Right from, it's two items. It's this sheet right here, which has all of our students, and what are they gonna cost us? And it's how much are we going to receive in circuit breaker funding? You add those two together, and
So
that's,
I'm pretty simple. How many people did it take to move, to have to be, to go out of district this year compared to last year?
we had
How many?
13 additional students over the course of the year.
13 additional students, and is that the biggest number of students that you have had in how many years?
It is, I mean, like I said, previous year, FY10 was our previous worst year, at 10.5% increase.
Okay, how many people?
So that's probably 6 to 7 students.
And of the 13 additional students, from looking at this particular chart, especially with the non-public schools that they go to, how many of them went into the non-public schools? Just
Yeah, it's
Of
like,
that-
it's
of
a
that
roll of the
13.
dice on whether, it all depends on an IEP, which.
Well, I
they
understand
determine.
that, I understand
Yeah,
that, but
I-
in this particular year, did we have a student and, there's some pretty hefty costs.
Right, and a couple of those, the 194
Yeah, $194,000.
and the 200.
And the $210,000.
Yeah.
So my question would be, of the 13 additional students, I mean,
There were
this,
2 of those that were above 150.
there were 2 of them, so right there, we took a very large hit on 2 students.
Exactly.
So back to Bill's starting point. So we're more than willing and anxious to hear your suggestions on how we can help deal with this particular issue, because from our point of view, there's nothing we can do about it. They move in, we have to educate them.
I think I mentioned when we did our presentation, that my goal, like, if this year turns out the way I think it's going to, we should end the year with additional funds. And we have the ability to prepay. And what I'd like to start to try to do is budget more contingency and use the prepay and start to reduce our reliance on circuit breaker. I don't know if you remember me saying that, but that's the goal, is start to reduce that, so that becomes our contingency instead of the stabilization fund. We get $1 million, and next year we expect to get almost 1.8 million, because our expenses were so high this year, our reimbursement will be higher than it's been. But on average, about $1.5 million in circuit breaker reimbursement. And if we can reduce the reliance on that so that we only budget $1 million of that, or $750,000 of that, the rest of it is money that's going to be coming in that you can use as contingency. Right.
So can we get, in addition to this statement that we will now be able to get from you, can we get one of these?
Well, that's what I can provide, as part
I
of.
would like one of these, because it
Yeah.
tells you, I
Yeah.
mean, these are individual students, and you'll get a feeling for.
Right, and actually, in all honesty, as I was I was trying to anticipate questions, I'm sorry I didn't anticipate the one about the account numbers.
Well-
But the reason I generated this sheet here was I anticipated that this would make things clearer of how we track.
Right.
And then as I was doing it, I'm like, well, I'll just attach this to the budget status report I send to the school committee, which you guys then will get after those meetings.
So all of a sudden, we go to some meeting, we go to a FinCom meeting, and it's like, like the end of February, and we get, well, we have another $210,000 outplacement.
Right, well, you'll start getting them in September, and you'll be able to say, here's September's, here's October's, here's the difference between the two.
Well, okay, well, I mean, we can track it as we go along, and we
Yeah.
can say, okay, so it's got up to this point, and we can very clearly see, and I'll tell you, with these new policies that we have for tapping that sped reserve, the FinCom has a very heavy duty,
Yep.
which I do not take lightly, which is basically second guessing the guessers. And I'll say, second guessing the estimators. In other words, we think, for the last few years, we've got 6 students, 7 students, and then there were 10 students, and this last year there were, oh my God, 13 students.
We don't guess, we never guess.
Okay.
No, there's no guessing in this area.
Oh, okay. Then, if I've got to second guess you guys,
But I mean, I would put it a little bit different way. I mean, I would just say, that Jim and his team are, going person by person, and the whole school department is saying, these are all the people we have that we can reasonably plan for. We can go out to the out-of-district placements, and we can, I imagine there's some degree of negotiation or some degree of, of figuring out what the best placements are every year, and that process comes to a close, and you can say, this is what it looks like. And for next year, it looks like $5.4 million. And then the question is, I guess the art of it comes into saying, how much should you build in for the unanticipated in the operating budget, and how much should you build in the contingency funds, and how much should you build in reserves?
okay, so if I'm relying on someone's estimate in second guessing, I need to know who that someone is.
I'm not sure what
I know, what estimate are you
you're asking.
When you put your budget together,
no, it's an
what's
estimate.
foreseeable and what's non-foreseeable?
This Of all the numbers in our budget, this is probably the most absolute number we have. Because we have a head
Well,
count of
let me
people.
let me just ask this, okay? I've got a history going back to FY08, okay? And it shows the annual variation in out-of-district tuition costs. And the average is somewhere below 10%. So if I anticipate for next year 10%, I'm being pretty responsible, because that's more than what I've averaged. Now, this year was extraordinary. So,
It's extraordinary because you had these non-public school placements.
well, we
In large part.
had 13 students that we had anticipated, right. But, so what I'm asking you is that irresponsible to say, okay, I'm going to anticipate 10% or 12% or 15%? It's more than the average that I'm anticipating. Should I set aside more than that?
Should you be using the, well, okay. So, at one point, I thought that some of this was being forecast by a private contractor. No, it's all school personnel.
It's
Well,
me.
then, we would like to see perhaps, and we'll talk about this in our own meetings, I would like to see and talk to those personnel.
You-
But I don't understand,
Yeah.
these are
Yeah,
people
I
that
mean-
just decide to come into our school district, you can't, we don't
Oh,
know
that's
who's
not-
gonna.
No. In saying, okay, when we estimate this, it should be an average, should it be an average, should it be a mode, should it be a mean?
Well, but I
Should
would,
be averaging, how many years we
But
should
it's
be
more,
doing
it's more
this?
certain than this, because it's kind of like, we know we're gonna have to, you know, when somebody comes in and somebody has an IEP and they have a placement that's decided for them, and they decide like, okay, you need to go to this collaborative and their rate for next year, it's like saying, I'm gonna go to Harvard next year. We could all find out what Harvard's gonna cost next year. And so you look at the number of students and you take the tuition and you kind of multiply it out. I mean, so I'm very comfortable with that methodology, because that's pretty straightforward. I think the tougher part is, how much cushion do you build in for the movements?
Well, exactly, how conservative are you gonna be? Are you gonna say,
So-
well,
So what I heard Jim say, you have 10% cushion built into the budget?
Right,
Based on historical data.
yeah,
I don't have a
exactly,
problem
based
with
on our average.
So-
Our average has been below 10%.
Understand. So you're on the little high side, conservative. But the other thing I'm looking at now is, again, you're giving information that says we've got some cushion in there based on a projection. In your projection of these detailed numbers here, how many of them are estimates?
Those are our actual.
These are actuals.
numbers.
So this assumes zero, your projections basically got zero assumptions in there for new people being added in.
Right, well, that's the contingency, that's the 350,000 we have right now would accommodate, and we're trying to build that before the start of the year. Yep, so what you'll see in September is, you'll have this one already, and then September will show have we had any additional students come in over the summer, and you'll know exactly where we are in September, and then every month after that, you'll see exactly what our costs are at that point.
and when these people, when we stop owning them,
Mhm.
is that right?
Yeah, we've already taken them out. Well,
Okay,
if you see a
what's the
student,
timeline, when these folks drop off?
Well, we don't, this is just for 2006.
I know, well, you can't make assumptions.
I imagine you could probably actually project that out.
well, yeah, if you see somebody who's less than 50, normally that's a partial year, so that student is leaving us at some point, and that's the cost for the full year rather than a whole year. And the same in reverse will be true when somebody comes to us during the year. They might cost us 70,000 for the year, but we're only going to have to pay 50 because of the partial year.
So the thing is then, how is it, what did we miss along the way that we didn't know we were gonna have this deficit?
We started, if you look at the front page, we had, as I said, banked the 175,000 out of the town manager provided, because we've been talking about the fact that we don't have a contingency, and stabilization fund certainly helps in that regard. But it was just the number of students that we got in this year versus what we've gotten in past years was just so much more. than
I
we
guess
were
I don't mean so much,
anticipating.
you knew, but why didn't we know? Or when, because we.
Well, and like I said,
I guess that we need some more
Right before the town
authority.
meeting.
I said, I'll
Yeah,
take
we-
responsibility for that. It has not been the practice to provide the finance committee with budget status reports, they have been done in public meetings with the school committee for the months, and, you know, it's up on the screen. This very sheet was up on the screen and being
So
discussed.
that's what it is. They
And
were
I
available,
meet
we
regularly
didn't
with
have
the town
them.
manager,
Okay.
and he was providing me with the snow and ice, and I would add that in so the school committee could see that number as well. I just didn't do the extra step of informing you guys, but I think by sending those to you after the school committee has seen them, takes care of that step.
Well, we can really avoid this thing in the future, especially if you're going to be coming in, and I urge you to come in as early as you can to talk to us about any possibility of having to ask for sped reserves.
Yeah, well, and the other thing I thought of, and I think you just mentioned it, Karen, a few minutes ago, was that one of the stipulations of the stabilization fund is that we've done everything we can to cover the expense, and then if it's an extraordinary situation, then, you know, you've got to demonstrate that. And I think coming in on a regular basis and providing you guys with those reports lends itself to that.
Right, we'll get a sense of what's extraordinary.
Yeah, part of the heat here is that 11th hour meeting before town meeting.
Oh, and I understand
You
that
say, well,
completely.
what's this?
Right,
Like,
and part of
this one got by us?
Yes.
I mean, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, and that, I will say that I was not familiar with the process. I actually was anticipating the possibility of it being a warrant article at town meeting, so I certainly wasn't trying to avoid attention. I thought I was gonna have to speak at town meeting. And when Lynn and I were kind of putting it together, I provided her with the backup, but we were also having a school committee meeting. I said, if they have any questions, come and get me, but that didn't happen.
I think there was, if I can, I think there was, I think it was an unusual combination of circumstances, one that which is a, learning lesson to a certain extent as we proceed, and the timing is good in a way because it's this very discussion that's going to be necessary, as Karen identified, as we get into questions about whether or not we should use funds out of a reserve fund. So I think it was a unique combination of circumstances. Jim, certainly for the last couple of years, as special education costs have become a larger focus, has provided the school committee and fairly frequently my office with sort of an update. I think sometimes we communicate so well, we don't always ask the simple questions about communication. So what Jim was providing to the school committee back 6+ months ago, I think we assumed that what we do, which is built into the charter, we provide you these reports. I just assumed everybody was under the same obligation. Guess we weren't. And so, to a certain extent, I think it was just all those things coming together. And, it was a bad, it didn't work out as anticipated, because I think there was an expectation that the communication was happening, and it just wasn't. And it wasn't missed because Jim goes into public meetings and throws up these numbers on a page on a pretty regular basis, so it just one piece was missed in the process. But it's, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on it and find a better way.
In reflection, this is something that when Jim mentioned, it's, every meeting you present your budget and where you are and things like that. And I know many years ago, there was a lot of conflict between the finance committee, the school committee, the selectmen and whatnot. And what happened, I think, in particular, was the school committee actually started reaching out and actually attending, to their chagrin, sometimes, the finance committee meetings. And as a result of that, though, the communication's gotten better. And I might just suggest that maybe not every meeting, but someone from our finance committee attend the school
That's what I was
committee.
going to suggest as well.
Yeah, just tap somebody.
Yeah, I
Come on down.
certainly don't mind attending. I'll say this, and part of the reason I don't mind attending is because I take pride in, over the years, people saying that relationship has improved and that the school department is much more transparent in its finances, and it kind of it definitely concerned me when it came to light that you guys felt blindsided and that we weren't being transparent. And I asked Bill, I said, by all means, we'll come to a meeting, answer any questions you guys have, explain it, because that is important to me. So going forward, I don't have any problem going to those meetings and with the report, and can just walk through it. It won't take long, and you guys will be up to speed on where we are.
I think what Tim may have been suggesting was the opposite, right? Sort of someone from this group going to
Go
the school
to your
committee.
meeting, yeah.
But I would say that if the information is provided, of all of the moving parts, just like we have, it's a bad analogy, but as we've often said, our special education is snow and ice, except you see it, right? It's a tangible thing. We all know it's bad out.
Right.
But we report that on a regular basis because it is. That's now become what special education is for the school department. So I think what Jim is identifying is additional reporting or providing the existing reports to the finance committee makes you all aware. And so then if it triggers the need for one or more of you, I'm not saying you
Right.
shouldn't go, but it certainly sets that trigger off, that it raises an awareness back in September,
Right.
that someone may say, I think it's time to go. If for some reason it doesn't become a regular, which is fine,
Right.
it does put on your docket on a regular basis a very important topic.
Is it fair to say, Jim, that obviously if you have a situation where you add a student in September, you know that big impact for the balance of the year. What happens when the person joins in January? That's just a partial year, right?
Right.
And you know at that point
We
in
know
time.
that, we know two things. We know what it's gonna cost for the rest of that year, and then what the full tuition is
The following
that
year.
we have to budget for
So
the next
the
year.
worst case is the one that happened to us, that's got the school committee thinking about this differently. We had move-ins immediately following town meeting, 2 significant move-ins. We had to lay off teachers because of that.
2 years ago.
Previous year.
Yeah, so that was the wake-up call for us, it's like, we can't let this be happening. I mean, we can't have to lay off staff, because that was the only request we had to balance the budget going forward, because the budget was frozen now, it was voted. So that was our big wake-up call, when we got those move-ins between town meeting and the end of the school year, and we're like, we can't be doing this is awful. I mean, that was a terrible situation.
But if I could add to that, it's important that although the communication, meaning the documentation, will improve, to identify 2 things from this, I'm speaking from my sort of official capacity, I guess. One is, the pressure still exists. In other words, if the situation arises as it did 2 years ago, when the situation changed in terms of people moving in, students moving into the district post-town meeting, which is the most extreme case, there is no magic formula. We are, this year and probably last year, and to a lesser extent next year, and then probably go away, we have a capacity to do some things which are not what we've historically had the ability to do, and will not, rolling forward, have the ability to do. And that is to to absorb things like $1 million snow and ice deficits. We better hope it ends up being somewhat typical, meaning 45 inches moving forward. So I think we still recognize that as prepared as we can be, there still will be times that the school department in June and July will be contemplating making reductions because of special education expenditures, and that this year and again last year and maybe a little bit next year represents a unique set of circumstances. But none of what we're doing not resolves the problem, because it's not a problem, right? Resolves the financial reality of this. Meaning there will still be times, even with the reserve, because the reason that this group and Selectmen and the rest of us agreed to the reserve was you can't tap into all of it at once. It really is a soft landing, not a complete landing. And so there'll still be those really difficult decisions. If 2 move in right at town meeting, are we accounting for the 250 now? Or are we making really tough decisions now because we may need the 250 later? So I don't want to lose sight of the fact, which I know you folks have not, that this year provided in my opinion, and I don't like the word too much, a unique set of circumstances that allowed us to resolve a number of issues, snow and ice, special education, and that circumstance probably won't exist again.
And I think along those lines, a legitimate conversation, you alluded to this earlier, would be what should the contingency within the budget be? And that will, if that's in there, then it makes it a lot easier to justify that if you exceed that, then you can go into the stabilization fund, because you've been responsible. So I think trying to determine what is a responsible amount of contingency is a very legitimate conversation.
The other part, and back to something you said, Chris, we have talked to our legislators on a number of occasions about ways in which they could help mitigate these problems. One would be to fund at the appropriate level circuit breaker, which they sometimes do and sometimes don't. The other cost that we all share, all communities share, unfunded cost is sped transportation. The state does not reimburse us for that in any way. If they could even partially reimburse us for us and everybody else for some of that special education transportation, that would help too. So, if you all wanted to add the voice of the Finance Committee to ours with our legislative, contingent to try to get them to continue to push on those things. And, that's not a 1 year, that's a multi-year deal, but if we keep pushing on it, sooner or later, hopefully somebody will see the light on that.
The only problem with that is usually it's a zero-sum game.
It's a zero-sum game.
They'll add transportation and reduce
Take it out
the
of
circuit breaker,
somewhere.
and some, the number is the same that you get.
The shell game.
So all this time, we've been talking about out-of-district tuition, and the out-of-district transportation goes with those students?
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Is that,
And I guess
and that's
the
not
other,
even in services here, right? On this
No,
list?
no.
That's a separate
Separate
line
item.
item on your budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
and then I guess the only other thing that is really not our purview at all as the Finance Committee to talk about, except in the sense that we do have high special education costs relative to.
Well, not relative to other communities.
We don't?
No.
I thought-
I go to conferences and professional development, and every town says the same thing.
Yeah.
We must be the best providers of special education because they're all moving into our town. Everybody thinks that, but, the number of students,
moving.
the number of out-of-district students we have versus our total enrollment is very consistent with
It is,
other
okay.
communities.
I thought that was.
How about a percentage of budget? Special education cost us a percentage of budget. We
Yeah.
in-district more, I think, than most folks. So if we in-district more from most folks, and our number out-of-district is consistent, I think, providing mainstreaming kids is great, and I think the district does a fantastic job of that. The question necessarily isn't the out-of-district head count, it's the total spending on special education as a percentage of overall school budget,
Right.
general fund to general fund.
Yeah.
That would be the real comparable number to me.
Yeah, and it ranges between 25 and 30%, and we're at 26.5%, somewhere in there.
All that, a lot of that data.
Of our total, of our budget.
A lot of that data on a summary basis is available from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education because we all
Right,
report it.
right,
And it's
right.
out there on a big database. So you can actually go and look at the other towns and see what they're
Right.
paying. You look at their financials, summary financials, so you can get a sense of that. And having done that a little bit, as Jim says, I didn't see us double everybody, it's not like
Right.
that, this is just a cost that everybody is dealing with. And you read the article in the paper about payroll, the superintendent, they're crying about their sped costs. And so
Right.
it's just it's an ongoing issue that we're all dealing with.
Right.
So,
Can you, and again, I'm being new to this as an average taxpayer, and I'm looking at $297,000 to go to a non-public school. What is that line?
That is, in that case, it's probably a high needs student who, it could be, deaf, dumb, and blind, or I don't think that's the case in that one, but
Right.
needs
I
tremendous
don't
amount of
need-
services and is there it lives there for the whole year.
So it's a residential program?
Mhm. Yeah, those high ones are usually residential.
and often those-
Medically fragile.
Right.
Medical care.
Yeah.
Yeah, they often
Yeah.
need medical care sometimes.
So those ones that, and when you say that's a non-public school, what kind of an institution is that? Is
Right,
that-
it's not a school, so to speak.
Right.
It's dedicated to special needs students.
Landmarks, have you ever heard of the landmarks?
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
those
not
are-
sure it's one that we often have sent students to. There are a handful around that's all they do, is they deal with these very high needs, special education students. That's their business.
Well, now that we're talking about it, so Landmark is one of them? And what is the protocol on, how does Landmark get into the process?
Right, they have
What's
to get
supposed happen?
licensed by the state.
Well, but other than that.
Right, but then they don't choose a student, and what ends up happening is there's an independent, individual education
Right.
meeting,
Meeting.
and the worst part of those meetings is that whichever way the parent wants to go is the way they're gonna go. So there could be a student that we think should be placed out of district, but the parent wants them in district. That student's gonna be in district. That same exact student, if the parent wanted them out and we wanted them in, they're gonna be out. They always go with the parent. So, and then we've got to give them some choices of schools, and if, you know, they might have their heart set on one school, and we'll fight back, but sometimes you just don't win that.
These non-public schools, do they solicit?
They
solicit
are
the
known
students?
for providing the services.
Right.
And what it's kind of a cottage industry that's developed, but there are special education advocates who provide services to parents, and they know all of the schools that are available and let them know about them, and which ones they think are the best.
And some of these schools have, as you might imagine, some have different kinds of services. So if a student has a certain
They specialize in
issue,
different things, yeah.
they might go to one school versus another school. So, but that's all, it's sort of like, imagine it as being that, you know, a state contract that people are on. So they're like all that way. They don't come and try to sell their.
Right, and the state regulates their rates as well.
Okay, so they
The
negotiate
state
with the state.
regulates their rates.
Right, so they set the rates, and then how much they can go up in any given year.
I see. In which department of the state does that?
So, no,
The Department of Education.
probably.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to know who that regulator is. Sorry.
Okay,
Oh, you know, I would like to know the regulator.
I can find out for you. Mhm.
Okay, so other public schools, what's $41,000 buying?
Yeah, it's probably a student going there during the day, and
To-
getting services there, a student that just,
To another public school because they have a program we don't have?
it's listed, those are the possibilities within that category. In most cases, it's probably going to, the student's probably going to a collaborative that we're not a member of. And that falls under 9100 as well as, we don't send too many students to another public school.
Right, okay.
I'd be hard pressed to think of any.
Yeah.
The only example I've ever heard of is students who want to go to a vocational school that has a program that none of our local vocational schools have. So in that case, they have the option to do that.
No, well, I think this was very helpful, and I really appreciate your coming post-budget cycle and in midst of the end of the year. So we appreciate it. We appreciate it coming. I think.
I appreciate the opportunity. I think it only helps going forward.
And I think, having that transparency will definitely help, but I think it just would have, we would have had a better informed conversation through the spring if we had that information. And next year, I hope we'll have a more informed year.
Well, as Karen pointed out, last year, it was a different set of circumstances because there was no contingency fund, so you didn't put on the hook to potentially make any decisions about it last year. So now it's a different game changer.
It has changed.
Yeah, so I get that. And again, I know Jim was saying the same thing, but, we'll continue to refine the reports until they're helpful and the way you feel like you need it. And we continue to do that every time, so keep asking.
Thank you.
So going forward, I'll provide, starting in September, when I provide the school committee the budget update reports, I'll provide them to you. And I do think we need to have that conversation about a responsible contingency amount going forward.
Yeah, like to be. That's a good thing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion? All in favor?
In favor of the motion.